Welcome back to another chapter of Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks Part 2. Last time, Raiden has just escorted Kung Lao and Aiko to Nightwolf's East Coast sanctuary, aside from the mountain base. And Earthrealm, the piece of Earthrealm has literally been shattered as Shao Kahn invaded Earthrealm after resurrecting Queen Sindel. And the Wuxi Academy was under attack by the Centaurs, and Raiden and Kung Lao fought them off, only to have Raiden's powers be sapped because Earthrealm was in so much peril merging with Outworld, thus the portal. And Sonya, Johnny Cage, and Jax reunited in Los Angeles, but unfortunately, I used the canon death of Johnny Cage as he was murdered by Motaro, rather than Shao Kahn in Annihilation. And Liu Kang and Kitana were scouting Outworld until they got paralyzed by the time they spotted Kano. So, this is unmistakable. Mortal Kombat continues again. Alright, Mortal Kombat continues again. And this time, it's the invasion, the events of Mortal Kombat 3. Every battle should have their own separate chapter, like a mission per chapter in most games. And no, I'm not taking any inspiration from MK9. It sucks! I agree with you, Fourth Snake. I grew up with the classic trilogy in MK3, Defenders of the Realm, the first movie, and especially some battle songs I'll use are some of the highlights of 95 and 96. Side note, I much rather have the Kungs as uncle and nephew rather than cousins, as there's a huge age gap. Loud be around his 20s when MK2 came out, and Jig be the same age in his debut in MKX. For once, NetherRealm did a good retcon, as cousins would be too awkward for this sort of thing. Anyway, I'm so excited to finally get started on one of my favorite MK installments since early childhood. Raiden, Kung Lao, and Aiko arrived at the East Coast. The ocean was unusually calm compared to the sinister sky above. The latter two looked around the barren beach, and the monk grew skeptical. This is supposed to be Nightwolf's sacred land? There's hardly anything here. Waiting for a response, Kung Lao looked over and saw Raiden, who was out of it for a moment. He then held his head. Ugh. This is indeed the shaman's natural camp. I hadn't seen him occupy this place in over 3 months. I was once concerned if he has forgotten his Matoken ways, as he grew too dependent on technology. Which you would see from that episode in Defenders of the Realm, Familiar Red. Somehow that statement tugged another memory in Aiko. Where is he? The Thunder God pointed toward rows of wild beach grass. His reservation shall be amongst these grass stalks. This place was used as a burial ground. If I'm correct, Nightwolf must have protected it by utilizing his powerful energies from the invasion. This was the resting place for many of his tribe's ancestors, and I believe their essence can be of great use to us. I hope this would be enough to restore you temporarily. He nodded. Straight ahead shall be your destination. Before Kung Lao headed beside Aiko, Raiden stuck out an arm to halt him. What is it? Aiko is sensitive to Native American customs. She once grew up and succumbed to their ways, as if it was a self-trance, much as her first meditation session. The guardian of Earthrealm faced his partner. Kung Lao, you must be the anchor to her buoy and guard her heart and mind. She happens to be handicapped and fragile. The monk was surprised. She's handicapped? How can she fight or be of use to us? Only her heart shall remain useful in our endeavors. She always trusted Nightwolf most fondly while she was very young. His ways can be vital to our victory against Shao Kahn. Go now, hurry. Time is of the essence. Lau headed straight to the tall weeds following Aiko. Normally this is when Raiden would disappear in Shaolin monks. He led through the thick brush, even using his Rizrun tat at times to cut and remove some annoying stalks. Amongst the opaque woods they noticed a village consisting of several teepees, even a small bonfire. The flames made a dazzling display amongst the creepy, shadowy atmosphere. They figured there'd be an ambush made by Tarkhan's or Khan's generals, but everything seemed too quiet. Kung Lao! Aiko! Tenor greeted the duo with his pet wolf. Nightwolf! Kiba! She was thrilled to see them again, even alive and well. The reservation itself remained undisturbed. He grabbed her hand. We don't have much time. Raiden and I were waiting for the other warriors to show up, but we can't stall any longer. Come. He led the duo through some irritated and curious stares amongst the tribe. From their eyes looking onto the white visitors, Aiko grew worried. Don't worry, they won't harm us. I hope not. I mean, out of all the things we'd done... She could hardly finish her sentence. Her mind was full with regret. Full. Having the natives suffering from famine, illness, and annihilation from foreigners by usurping their lands. I just wish there was a way to make amends. You can pay us back later, Aiko, but we must keep our heads on and save Earthrealm. I know how you must be feeling. Lau just sighed. I know how she feels as well. She constantly had these insecurities, Kung Lao. She always worries for nothing. Your kind's cool. He finally escorted the duo to his former quarters. There it is. This teepee probably hasn't been used in so long. I figured that if I became a historian and evolved like you guys, I'd be a more promising Matoka. Needless to say, they weren't so thrilled. I even went to higher learning and became some sort of computer scientist. No one thought I'd be qualified. I just aced through everything. So even you'd been an outcast. From the interior and exterior it looked like any other tent, excepting there was a portable generator located in a back corner, along with several small gizmos. As they smelt the incense, he explained he just used his unique skills to protect his land from utter destruction, similar to a sort of force field, despite having numerous animals scampering away. He had the weary trio settled, and Kiba just headed to a comfy cushion and laid into it. Why did Raiden want us here, Nightwolf? I had visions of Earth's demise, as well as the Thunder God losing his powers. I was expecting the rest of us to arrive, but there's no time. For what? You must awaken each of your inner animalistic spirits. Our what? You mean we get to transform into a certain animal? How? I call it animality. They exchanged quizzical looks. He then gathered more incense and added some to the flames. Each of you will have your animality awakened. However, the process can be rather difficult, like going through a dream state and battling your demons. So, this is like a fatality or a brutality utilizing the spirit of an animal? Precisely. I hope I get to either be a fox or an ankylosaurus. Well, we'll just see. I remember it was your favorite dinosaur. I was able to turn into a wolf while I saw Raiden turn into an electric eel, no problem. Or maybe you might turn into a rabbit since you were born in the year of one, Lau said. This caught the newbie off guard. Wait a minute! How did you know I was born in the year of the rabbit? Well, you were around 6 years old during the second tournament, right? Yeah? Do the math. She soon connected the dots and she was dumbfounded Kung Lao was able to figure out a personal detail. I always want to make Kung Lao like the logical one. Kind of like Spock. More logical than Liu Kang. After a while there was some silence aside from the crackling of the fresh logs, but the burning chemicals were making Kung Lao and Aiko feel lightheaded and sleepy. Somehow the shaman wasn't affected by it, but perhaps he was more resistant to the embers than the other two. Not even Kiba noticed, excepting when he let out a big yawn. They just became frozen, and all they did was fix their eyes on the lulling flames. They soon felt a little nauseated, and their bodies were becoming heavy, just barely keeping their eyes open. Eventually, Aiko was the first to lay her head down, especially considering she was the most susceptible. Soon enough, Kung Lao succumbed to the intense incense. He dropped his hat before he collapsed. Their bodies became numb and immobilized as sleep finally swept over them. Amongst the darkness, visions flashed before his eyes. They were blurry at first, but Kung Lao managed to see himself remaining young, while he watched each of his friends grow old and wither and be vulnerable to some violent shades. While they continued their slaughter, Raiden was helpless, that even his electrokinesis was feeble. He tried using his hat, but it only went through. It only went through them as they were nothing but air. It was just enough to make a distraction as they gained onto the single monk. He wished Liu Kang was involved in this scrimmage. He fought off, but each one of his attacks had little to no impact. He was able to lend a hit, but nothing fazed him. Each one attempted to flee, but Lao kept on them like a predator, never wanting to lose sight of the victims. With every swipe he grew more ravenous, desiring to tear them to the smoke slivers. By the time they each glided away from him, Lao gave chase from the Chinese forest. One time he threw his hat only going through them. By the time it retracted, it caused him to stumble. He still went on the prowl, and while the shades gained speed, so did he. He continued to gain up as did the shadows. Then his body began to hunch over as if he was running on all fours. He still kept at him, and by the time he was at the same velocity, he leapt. Suddenly his head hit the ground floor. The impact and jolt caused Kung Lao to stir. Slowly he pressed himself up by his weak, sweaty palms, noticed Nightwolf, who turned from looking over the flames. "Kung Lao! You've done it!" Did what? Catch up with those murdering shadows? What are you talking about? I saw you turn into a wild spotted cat, like a cheetah. You were thrashing your arms and softly roaring as if you were into some fresh meat. Kiba hates cats. He was just about to latch on to you. Flash shook away the daze. A cheetah? That must be my animality. What about Aiko? Shaman pointed to the comatose woman who was groaning in her sleep. She abruptly woke up at a dystopian world. The sky was barren and colorless. The surrounding buildings were destroyed. Her eyes then wandered onto a horde of undead looming towards her. Aiko began to recognize them as her former friends Kung Lao, Nightwolf, Liu Kang, Striker, and Katana. At first she became frozen with fear, but realizing she had no choice, her blood began to warm as they drew closer. By the time they were a foot away, she started to swipe a blunt object. She kept using that wide weapon, hoping to clip their lifeless vessels. Only, she began to notice she wasn't holding that brown club. It was attached to her, and she didn't stop. Regardless whether or not they were her zombified acquaintances, she only wanted to keep herself alive and never live in fear, like she did all before she was suddenly sent back in time when everything was repaired and livid. As she continued to swing her club, she even charged in head first, even pounding them with all her body weight. Kung Lao and Nightwolf watched Aiko pound the ground hard as she moaned under her breath. The former wanted to stop her, but the latter needed to hold him back till the episode was over. Eventually she came to, noticed her body was just hard pressed into the ground floor. She did have a bit of a headache to compensate. Aiko was startled when Kung Lao offered her to sit up, thinking he was still in his ashen, mindless state. Her heartbeat dropped when she realized he was still normal, with his vibrant, intact clothing the same with Nightwolf's. What happened? It seemed you achieved your animality as well, Aiko. What? You mean I should just call you Ike the Ankylosaur, ha ha ha. Her eyes became glazed. I turned into my favorite dinosaur? Woohoo! She stuck up her fists and triumph even made some stims as she shook her hands. You know, I do stimming a lot. Damn it. I do stim a lot because, I'm autistic, and it's a common thing that they do to relieve stress or whatever, because, there's a lot of tension in your mind. Anyway, she stuck up her fists and triumph even made some stims as she shook her hands. Kiba came over and gave her a few licks. I can finally turn into an ankylosaur whenever I want to! Hey, whoa! You can't just turn into an animal willingly. You need to be in a certain state of mind to do it. What do you mean? Your body and mind need to be in sync, hyper-focused in order to attain this ability. Mostly it happens spontaneously, or just occurs when the time is right. You'll find out eventually. So basically you won't turn into your spirit So basically you won't turn into your spirit animal unless you have the proper mindset. Aiko was still confused, and he mentioned he turned into a cheetah temporarily. Aiko was surprised she would never thought those magnificent cats would be resided in Chinese borders. That was a very unusual animality for Kung Lao. But I guess since he's like a speedster or sweeper, I guess it makes sense, but it's rather unusual. They rose from their lotus positions, but the shaman hesitated as he looked to the Shaolin monk. You might need to change your attire to something more flimsy. Thus the change in outfit for MK3. He and Lao made a change of attire at a distant corner away from the flames, hardly being seen. She was surprised Lao had a cheetah of all things, as she doubted they were Chinese natives, and was glad Nightwolf had a wolf, which was the only animality that made sense. Though he figured merging with Kiba would be safer for him. Kung Lao's jaw was dropped. Wait! You can actually summon your wolf and merge with him? Don't ask. It's a little hard to explain. I guess Kiba's spiritual bond with mine is nearly the same, so that works. Besides, I can't perform my animality without him. Oh, I forgot to mention. He stated that Aiko gave him and Raiden permission on going inside her soul and reading her during each meditation session. Since the electric god mentioned Kung Lao being the anchor, she eventually trusted him too. Remember, the only thing that can make those sessions work is to have trust. It's a very powerful asset. From the last meditation session, Nightwolf noticed Aiko growing bitter as she grew older. Her younger self was more flamboyant and carefree, resilient. With her heart open, she'd be vulnerable, she feared. He assumed there was a web of factors in causing her to be closed-minded, as she can't pinpoint exactly what one cause was aside from her dystopian future, thus her spontaneity. He warned if it should open like a dam, she'd receive bitter memories. Thus there would be someone stronger than her and a trustworthy, reliable bond to help endure them. Kung Lao suddenly recalled Raiden's point of advice. On the subject, Nightwolf volunteered to aid the duo in defeating Shao Kahn, as Raiden has his limits once the merger began. He kind of had the worst. As they walked out, Nightwolf shouted, "Now, Kiba!" which made the wolf leap into his body while he glowed with a bright green aura, again from Defenders of the Realm. It caused the shaman to eliminate, you know the deal. Kung Lao emerged from his teepee after the clatter, wearing a completely different wardrobe, and thus the one from MK3. So, they had to change somehow. Let's go. I could sense immense evil energy coming from the north. We must proceed to it. Couldn't we just take the dragon jets? No, that would be unwise. Khan may be suspecting them. He'll most likely shoot them out of the sky. I mean, if our Air Force would get involved, it'll be hell to pay. Thank you, Mortal Kombat Reconciliation. Good point. It's best to infiltrate the enemy undetected. We'll just have to go on foot at the moment. Meanwhile, in a distant New York street, numerous cars have been decimated and abandoned. Some were unlucky to have gory denizens behind. Stryker wandered the sudden lightless outlets. Each display almost saddened the hero. Oh no! Not again! That's the 50th casualty found here! I'm not a huge fan of Stryker since the cartoon, but whatevs. Here are the communicators to report the damage. There was no signal, no response. Gizmos were useless. Damn! I can't get a signal out here! Looks like I'm on my own, as fate would have it. Then heard some scuffling. To him, they looked eerily familiar. Excepting the overhead lights, he saw nothing. Thought it was an illusion. So, oh boy, we got an old enemy. So we meet again, mate. He recognized the Australian accent. Kano! I should have known I'd found some vile like you. You accursed V-men left me in Outworld, and I lost my main base of operations thanks to that masked traitor cabal. I figured what better piece to wreak havoc than those abandoned subway tunnels, since Shao Kahn is running business here. It'll be an excellent way to repay him in exchange for my soul. Without your associates, you're helpless, especially without that lethal ninja assassin of yours. No matter, I'll finish with you. Technically, that would be a fight between Stryker and Kano. Did an okay job, but it got too much. Ugh. I'm not too good with fight scenes, even though they're primarily because it's Mortal Kombat. So, they made it onto the tracks, and I had that transition from the subway tunnels to the street, because in MK3, you can transition through stages. I wish they brought them back. It was so good. Very interesting. Head of the Black Dragons was about to blah blah. He's a meat grinder, those lethal knives and spin kicks. And he always spams them in the original. Even after you trip, he does those lethal cannonballs with Raiden's dives. Even Stryker was just as flabbergasted. You! Sure enough, it was Cabal. And I felt sorry for the guy, you know? Way better than his revenant form. Cabal was also able to evade Kano's knife throws with minimal effort, though he had to be wary with his cannonball maneuvers. By the time Respiration Man kicked Kano in the chest, which wasn't fully healed, put him in a disadvantage. Cabal made an uppercut, sending him upward through the street. Now it did the transition. It was an ideal place for a battlefield, as there are hardly any obstacles obstructing the warring trio. So, did the eye laser, red laser shot at a Cabal at Striker, dove away from the lethal trail. They remembered it could be powerful enough to eat through their skin like acid, which is true. There was more room to roam. There were a lot of cars around. Unlike the reboot, contrary to that, the stage fatalities. Like cat and mouse, he whizzed into the fray with his outrageous speed. And he won over Kano. Finish him! Striker cried. Cabal took off his respirator mask, and this is my favorite fatality! I wish they would bring this back. The decibel was so damn loud that it even made the black dragon skeleton run out of his body before it tripped and shattered onto the pavement. They just withered as Kano's green soul evaporated. That'll certainly take care of him, and hopefully the red dragons as well. Thanks, Cabal. Oh wait. That'll certainly take care of him, and hopefully the black dragons as well. Thanks, Cabal. I owe you one. Especially since the people will be safer without him. But not as long as Shao Kahn's in the picture. They abruptly heard a booming voice in the air, which they assumed was emanating from the tower. You weak, pathetic fools! I challenge you all to my own Mortal Kombat! Good luck on reaching me while your world suffers in its endless demise! I dare you, feebles! Come to where I am! Come, and show me your will! You will never win. Let's go. Kahn is expecting us. Not quite yet. We'll never stand a chance with just the two of us. We must find our allies first. Cabal? Cabal? You're actually gonna come along? Thought you never wanted to emerge onto the surface 'cause of, the Black Dragons work for Kahn for extra profits and bloody money. Besides, there's not very many bystanders around anyway to see my true face. And we would do Sonya a favor. If they even try, they'll just have their insides torn out and running. Laid a hand on his shoulder. Let's move. In the distance, Cabal heard some ruffles, and a couple figures started to emerge from the smoke. Originally, I was going to use the semi-interesting concepts of the nitty from the Power Rangers movie, inspiration of Nostalgia Critic, but it turned out to be bland. Mortal Kombat never shown how each combatant was able to attain their own animalities. There was Annihilation, but I wished Nightwolf wasn't so much of a dick on teaching it to Liu Kang. Besides, he said there were 3 tests, but the last one was never explained. Lame. I just made some random ideas to tie 2 and 2 together, but I'm not sure how the other distant fighters should attain theirs. I was also surprised Kung Lao had an unusual pick since cheetahs aren't really from China, but I guess it symbolizes his agility and flexibility. After all, I heard his revenant form was very quick, so that's a thing. As a kid, I always fantasized in having my own animalities, specifically my favorite dinosaur, the Ankylosaurus. Either that or a fox. But it didn't have a lot of potential unless it'd be tails. Speaking of things that inspired me, one of my elementary school bands once did a number called Anasazi. This can be fitting, and there are songs for that. You can find it on my virtual soundtrack, and maybe I'll leave a link in the description. Believe it or not, I managed to find an unofficial soundtrack of Defenders of the Realm, where I found the verses reptile and resurrection themes, and even had Cabal's as well. I was so disappointed it was near the abrupt end of the series, and Cabal was never seen again, along with Kano. So what better conclusion than that battle? Okay, I may have had a little inspiration from the remake, but they never used Cabal's classic scary face fatality. Also, whenever a new ally should... there's Chime. So with another Scrappy eliminated, I'll see you next chapter. Wow, that was short. Until then, this is the Ecron Writer signing out, and I hope I'll see you next chapter. Ciao, guys.